So I'm Saraba Mahendra and I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm psychological workforce lead in SLaM. And that role means I'm particularly focusing on the early pre-qualified workforce, so aspiring psychologists and psychological professionals, and really thinking about supporting this group of the workforce basically in as many ways as we can. And one of the ways that we do that is by providing webinars like this today. And I work in close collaboration with the IOP course and the Salomons course. And today we've got the Increasing Access Committee, a number of members from that committee here. So I'll just do introductions. So today has two parts. So part one is about hearing from different psychological professions. Specifically, we have Jess, who's an educational mental health practitioner, Emma, who's a music therapist, Fumi, who's a clinical associate psychologist, and we've got Philippe, who's a family therapist. So we've got an hour for part one, where we're going to hear from these different speakers, which is going to be wonderful. And then we've got part two, which is when we're going to hear about different avenues into clinical psychology specifically, and we're going to hear from a number of different trainees about their routes. You're welcome to join both parts or just join one or the other, so feel free to do what suits you best. In terms of introductions for part one, I'm going to hand over to my wonderful colleagues in the Increasing Access Committee. So I want to introduce you, Anissa. I was thinking mainly to introduce you, Anissa, Lauren, and a few others that have been involved in part one. So Anissa, if I start with you.
Oh, sorry, my camera's taking forever to load. Hello, everyone. I am Anissa. I am a second-year trainee, soon moving to be third-year trainee at King's. I am also a co-lead of the Increasing Access Committee Aspiring Psychologist stream with Lauren, who I guess will go next.
Yes, that sounds good.
Hi everyone. Yes, so like Anissa, I am a second year, soon to be third year trainee at King's. I also am a co-lead for the Increasing Access Committee Aspiring Psychologist stream. And what we are is a trainee-led initiative to increase access across the world of clinical psychology. And we run workshops every couple of months or so to do that. So yeah, there'll be some information later if any of you want to join our stream and join our mailing list. But yeah, for now, I'll leave you with Saraba. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Sorry, just a quick note.
Yeah.
For anyone who wants to submit questions today, Lauren and I will be keeping a track of questions. Please do use the link that we've put in the chat. On the slider, you can also boost questions. So if you have a question that's similar to someone submitted beforehand, just press the boost and it will raise it on our list. If we don't have time to complete all the questions today, we will choose the top 10 and try to get those answered for you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anissa. I also want to just introduce Lucy. Lucy, you there from my team? I hope she's there. I'm not sure if she is.
Hi, yeah.
There you are.
Sorry, slow computer. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you. I'm an assistant psychologist working with Saraba in corporate psychology and psychotherapy. So I help Saraba with all things to do with early workforce.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without Lucy, so thank you. Fantastic. So so the plan, like I said, I've explained there's two parts. We've got a number of speakers. I don't know, Lucy, if you're okay to just put the agenda into the chat for part one, if that's okay with the timings. We're going to try and work to these sharp timings. So each speaker has about 10 minutes. And in terms of questions, we're going to leave, we've got 10 minutes at the end after our four speakers to answer any questions that come through the link. So I will turn to Lauren and Anissa to help manage that. So do use that if you can, and do boost the questions, because obviously we won't have time to do everyone's questions if there's hundreds. We will pick the most popular questions, and that's worked quite well in previous webinars. So do that. Cameras off, mics off, and I think, is there anything else, team, to mention? We will also be asking for feedback, towards the end. So we will cascade that afterwards with the recording of today at the end. And those who've signed up via the link, you'll automatically get that, but we'll also cascade via our other networks as well. So please also share wider with anybody who might be interested. So great. Anything else, team, I've missed or needs to be mentioned? We're all good.
I think that's it.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we're good to go. So our first speaker is the wonderful Jess, who is an education mental health practitioner who works in SLaM. This is a relatively new role, actually, generally. It's been around for 3 years and has come from the NHS long-term plan, which has a huge focus on improving psychological care in early years for young people. So I will hand over to you, Jess. I'm going to turn my camera off. Jess, I'm going to spotlight you. I don't think I can actually, it's not letting me, but anyway, hopefully you will be the only one on screen, but I'll hand over to you. So take it away. Thank you, Jess.
Okay, hi everyone. So my name is Jessica, or Jess, and I am an EMHP, which stands for Educational Mental Health Practitioner. So what I do is I do one-to-one interventions with young people, particularly if they're sort of dealing with anxiety or low mood. And then I also work with parents or carers with children who have sort of behaviours that challenge or they have fears and worries. So with those interventions, they're very short, very short, max about 7-8 weeks. Can go on a bit longer if you're doing other things, but maximum the interventions kind of last for 7-8 weeks. So as well as sort of doing one-to-one interventions, I also do sort of whole school approach. So with that, what I do is I work with parents, I work with students or the pupils, and I work with staff, and that's sort of more group work. And that can include like workshops, coffee mornings, or just sort of larger groups. So example workshops that we might do in both primary and secondary school include sort of well-being, mental health, exam stress, emotion regulation, transition groups. So recently I sort of worked in primary schools where I'm working with year sixes and sort of helping them, well, me and another practitioner, we work with year sixes who are transitioning from year 6 to year 7 and just sort of supporting that process and getting them to understand what that means for them, how they're feeling, their emotions, their thoughts and feelings, their behaviours towards it. So we're just sort of making them feel more comfortable and more at ease with that transition. So yeah, so that's what I do. So one-to-one interventions and then whole school approach. Or we also signpost to other services. So if we get a young person or we get a child who, oh sorry, we get a young person or a child who, you know, doesn't really fit with our service, we'd signpost them to another service that might best fit their needs. So how I got into the role is, it's so funny because I was a higher level teaching assistant, and then my friend was like, oh, so in that post, I used to do this thing called talk time, which is where I would sort of talk with kids between year 1 and year 3 about how they're feeling and, you know, what's going on for them. And that was sort of my first point with mental health. I was like, do you know what? I love this. And my friend told me about this role. Like I had no idea about this role. And luckily enough, I work at Lambeth and a role came up for Lambeth. So I was like, right, perfect. I'm going to apply. I applied. And I guess with the application process, you apply for the job role. So NHS, I work for the NHS, and then SLaM, and then you apply for the uni post. So I got the NHS, I got the job, and then I applied for uni. I think, well, if you get the job, you're basically going to be at uni. So yeah, apply for uni, and then I got it. And then you train for 1 year. So I started in January 2021, qualified in Jan 2022, and I've been qualified for 9 months now. And literally had our graduation on Tuesday, which was nice at King's. I trained at King's, by the way, King's College. Yeah, so yeah, I'm qualified for a year, train, and then I've just been working at schools, work at both primary and secondary school. And yeah, I guess with our service as well, it's completely brand new. So in the beginning, we're all just kind of mucking together and creating resources and creating relationships with schools, which is great. And our service is actually expanding in January. So we're going to get, I think, 4 new trainees and 1 supervisor. So if you're interested, look out for adverts for that. And how I the qualifications that I needed to get into this role. I did applied psychology at Durham, and then for my A levels I did psychology, sociology, and history, and I got AAB. And then for my degree I did applied psychology and then teaching assistant for like 3 to 4 years, and then got this role. But with the sort of qualifications, I think unis would accept you with a different degree, but you just got to have that relevant experience. So working with children and young people, or working sort of in that sector. So yeah, you can have a degree, but it's kind of better if you have something psychology, education related, anything relating to children, young people. That kind of gives you a good stepping stone into my role. And I guess as well, do you know what? I love being an EMHP. It's great. It's just fantastic because you can actively see a change when you're working with these young people. And what I love about my job is that there's no typical day. Like, every day can be different. It's quite flexible, and I'm quite in charge of what my week looks like. So in the beginning in January, it was mainly sort of working from home, going into school once a week. But now it's more going into schools, which is great, / working from home. We have a minimum of like 1 admin day where you're working at home and you're catching up with paperwork. But in July, I was like going into schools at least three times a week, running transition groups, working with young people, and then 2 days working from home. So 1 admin day and then 1 team day. And yeah, it's just such a lovely job. It's really, really good. What attracted me to it was, I really wanted to make a difference in young people's lives. And I know it sounds very cliche, but, I actually wanted to. Especially after COVID, you can imagine mental health was a big thing after COVID, and a lot of children were really anxious. And I feel like my role has really helped them. But saying that, it's not easy. It isn't easy, especially, some. Also, sorry. But
You're right, Jess.
Yeah, sorry, I just saw something in the chat.
Oh, don't worry about the chat. Don't let that distract you. We'll come to questions
sorry.
if there's time. Don't you worry.
Sorry. Sorry, I thought that was you. So my role
You're
is
doing great.
It's called an educational mental health practitioner. So yeah, one of the challenges I would say for me is hearing what they have to say. So for example, I'm working with a young person and she's really, she's going through a lot, and hearing what she has to say, it can affect you. It can, so you kind of have to be able to, sympathize with them, but, create boundaries as well, because it can be really hard what they're saying to you. You kind of take it home with you. And what the good thing as well is that each EMHP gets a supervisor. So I have a supervisor who supports me literally throughout this whole process. And if I, need to speak to her, then I will, I can phone her, I can email her, and she's fantastic. Like, all the supervisors are fantastic, and it's just great to know that you have someone who you can speak to if something is really, really affecting you. And I guess we have quite a lot of free time as well. Not free time, but especially if you're working at home, sort of organizing your time can also be a challenge. Like, it's quite good, but you just need to make sure that you're organized, especially with like admin work and paperwork, because we use a system. If we're meeting a young person, then that all needs to go into the system, and if you leave it for a while, it can pile up. So just making sure that you're being organized with your time. And also sometimes what can be quite tricky is creating relationships with schools and young people and parents, and just kind of getting that rapport. That can be quite tricky. So if you're quite a personable person, this is for you, because sometimes schools and young people there's a bit of a resistance sometimes, or if you're not on the same page, that can be quite challenging. So you have to persevere, basically. And I guess this job is just so fulfilling for me. I love it. I love making a difference. I love, creating resources, creating workshops. We've created like a menu of workshops that we're going to present to schools, and you know, they can pick which ones they want to do. We're going to go in, present them. It's just great. It's just really fulfilling seeing them. Thank you. Seeing how, you know, they're progressing. And yeah, even though our interventions are really, really short, sharp, sweet, you can definitely see a difference from week 1 to week 8. And even if you don't, it's fine. Sometimes you might have to sort of signpost them and move them on to other services or stuff in the school. But I guess what's great about our role is it's just linking sort of the NHS and the schools together, so creating that bridge and creating that gap between the two. Yeah, I think that's it, to be fair. But yeah, I love my job. I love it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jess. You did that like perfectly to time, and just loved hearing about your passion and what drew you into the profession. So thank you so much. And I bet you've all been called to action since COVID and working with young people who've been really affected, particularly during the COVID pandemic, and continue to be. So thank you so much. We're a little bit ahead of time. You've done such a great job. There are some specific questions that have come through the Slido, which I will just ask you that direct specifically for you as an EMHP.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
So I'll ask you them now. There is time, like I said, everyone, don't worry, there's time at the end for more general questions as well. But this one for you specifically is, this is from somebody who said, I'm in my final year of studying psychology BPS degree. Should I apply for the EMHP or start a master's in psychology? What would you do if you were in my position? So it's quite a specific question. We can only give you some suggestions, but I don't know whether you wanted to touch into that. Yeah.
So I didn't do a master's. I did my degree and then I went straight into like work and then did this role. So, but I am working with people who have done masters, and, you know, like I said, I've just kind of gone straight into it. If I was you, maybe just because I needed a break from the studying, I would want to get experience. They want to see that you have experience. So if you're at uni and you've been doing different things, that's great. But they want to see that, you know, as well as you having the degrees and having the certificates, they want to see that you've had real life experience actually working with these young people and working with these children that you're going to be supporting. So I definitely say, you know, do your masters if you want to do your masters, but definitely make sure you have experience with that as well, like real life experience, because in the interview they're asking you, like, give me examples, and if you don't have those examples, then you'll be a bit like,
super helpful. Thank you, that's really helpful. And there's another question, which is, we have a few, but we don't have time for absolutely all of them right now. Is an education mental health practitioner more relevant linked to clinical psychology or educational psychology? So I guess that's
really
an interesting question, I guess, because you're working in an educational context.
Yeah. I would say, so in our team, actually, we have two of our supervisors are both educational psychologists. So I'd definitely say, yeah. So our supervisors are actually EPs, so it's great listening to them as well. I'd definitely say it's more linked to kind of educational psychology. And in terms of my progression, that's what I actually want to do. I want to go into educational psychology. However, there is a girl, one of my colleagues, who wants to get into clinical psychology. So I would say there's more overlap with the educational psychology, but you can kind of go.
Well, I guess I'm just thinking as a clinical psychologist, and what I know of education mental health practitioners, you are working with an evidence base. You're using CBT, I believe, as some of the core principles, and you're using, so there's an overlap. So it's a bit of both to whoever answers that question.
Yeah,
it sounds
exactly.
Like
a bit of both, but
which is nice. Yeah. Fantastic. So I think we'll stop there. Thank you again, Jess, for your time and volunteering, because all the speakers have volunteered in their busy jobs to do this. So really, really appreciate that. You'll be staying for the whole first hour, and if there's questions at the end, we have time to direct to you. We'll come back to you because there are some more. So thank you so much. Well done.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So the next speaker I'm going to hand over to is Emma. And she is a music therapist who's going to talk about her role as a music therapist in Croydon Health Services. Over to you, Emma, and I will do the same for you with timings as well. Okay.
Right. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. My name's Dr. Emma Millard. I'm a music therapist, and I've also got a PhD, which is why I'm a doctor. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what music therapy is, how I got into the role, and what it's all about, really. So music therapists are psychological therapists and musicians, and we bring the two things together to support people with their mental health. In the NHS, we come under the umbrella of allied health professionals, and we're registered with the Health and Care Professions Council. So music therapy is a protected title. You're not allowed to call yourself a music therapist unless you've done a 2-year master's training. We're also part of a group of creative arts therapists, which include music therapists, art therapists, drama therapists, and dance movement therapists. We work in the NHS, we work privately for councils, in schools, sort of all over. And we're trained to work with a really wide variety of age groups and different presentations. So most people who trained to be music therapists with this 2-year master's will have studied music as an undergraduate degree, but I studied psychology, and I had music as a hobby. So I'm a singer and I play the piano and a very small bit of guitar, and I like to let loose on some percussion. And so I had lots of experience working in special schools and in day centres. I ran music sessions for adults with learning disabilities for a few years, and I just loved it. And I felt like music had so much potential to help people, and I really wanted to understand that and tap into it more. And as I said, the training is a 2-year master's qualification. There's 7 training courses in the UK that are accredited. And while you're doing the training, you have to also have personal therapy. So it's a psychodynamic approach, mostly music therapy, because we're thinking about how music can tap into some of those subconscious, unconscious processes, and thinking relationally how you develop a therapeutic relationship using music, and try and support people with whatever they're going through in that way. So I sent Lauren, who's just shared in the chat, a little slide that's a little bit sort of just summarising the points I'm making, my contact details, and there's an Instagram account to follow for where I work if you're interested. So as I said, we're trained to work with all age groups presentations. We work with groups and individuals, and we use a range of techniques, but the basis is that music is a way of connecting and communicating and sharing something about your experiences and your internal world. And some of the techniques we use a lot of improvisation. So you don't have to be a musician to attend music therapy to be a client. You can never have played an instrument before in your life, and that's our job to support you to learn how to do that. Well, not learn, we don't teach music in any way, but we sort of give people confidence to just go for it on the instruments. And we always say, you know, there's no right or wrong, there's no such thing as a wrong note, because lots of people feel a bit nervous if they haven't played instruments before. But also if people are musicians, they can come and may already have skills in using the music to express themselves. So yeah, we'll improvise, just have instruments in the room, people can just have a go. We also may use songwriting, listening to music together, singing together. And I think we all have experiences of music being helpful in our lives, and sort of telling stories through music, connecting with others, listening to songs that where you go, oh yeah, actually that really resonates with how I feel right now, or how I felt in the past. And I had an experience last night of going to the theatre and I watched Come From Away, which is just incredible, and I sort of cried all the way through. And I was just reflecting on how amazingly the music was used to communicate these stories of people's experiences, their lived experiences of 9/11 and what happened and how people connected with each other. And yeah, I think it's obvious how music is used to share things about how we feel, but maybe not everyone understands how a music therapist would work with someone. So the therapeutic relationship is really, really important. So I work in 2 different places at the moment. I'm employed by the NHS in Croydon Health Services, and I also work privately for a school, in a mainstream school, with children who have emotional challenges, who maybe have autism, learning disabilities. And in Croydon Health Services, I work in a children's bereavement and trauma team. So I think music's one really useful tool for helping people communicate things when it's really difficult to share those things verbally. So it's just sort of another method, and we use play a lot, role play, things like that. And I work in a team of drama therapists. So if you follow us on that Instagram account, you'll hear a bit more about that. So in Croydon, I work with children who are bereaved, who have lost family members, children who are dying, who have life-limiting, life-threatening illnesses, and their siblings. And we also work with children that have chronic conditions like epilepsy, asthma, and sort of the emotional impact on them. And some of the challenges of being a music therapist are, the thing I find most difficult is that no one knows what it is. And it feels like we often have to be our own advocate, which is fine, but it can be a bit frustrating when it feels like it's not understood or really respected as a helpful way of supporting people. And then once people know what it is and understand a bit more about it, they're like, oh, of course, that would be helpful, and we'll start referring people to you. But it's like constant work, sharing what we do with other teams. And also, as Jess was saying, some of the content of the work is really, really sad. It's really, really difficult. But as Jess said, we get lots of supervision. We also have, I choose to have personal therapy because I believe that that's really helpful. And means that I can be a better therapist. I can be more available if I understand what's going on for myself. But the best thing about the work is just basically everything else. I absolutely love it. It feels like such a privilege to be alongside children and people during some of the most difficult times of their lives, to develop that therapeutic relationship, for them to share, open up, start to trust you, and to do all this using music as well as words. It feels like a real honour. And to give some examples of the work I've been doing recently, so I currently work with a 2-year-old who, also to say that none of this is done online. I think some music therapists needed to work online during the pandemic, but I think, the time lag on Zoom means that playing music together is really difficult online. So it needs to be in person, really, if possible. So I do all my work in person, and I have a caseload. Recently I've been working with a 2-year-old who has leukemia, and he's found that diagnosis, thanks, Saraba, really stressful and difficult, and all the medical interventions, he hasn't really known how to handle that at 2 years old, and having very little language to express what's going on for him. And so using music, we've sort of built up a relationship. He gets loads of choice and control in the sessions. He requests nursery rhymes. We sing them together. We replace words of nursery rhymes with his name and things that happened to him when he's having his medical treatment. We role play with like a doctor's kit, where he gets to choose who's sick, and maybe if they're sick, maybe they're feeling sad, and we reflect on the feelings of the toys that he's operating on. Maybe I was going to say something about career progression, but maybe I'll stop there.
Do you want to do a quick sentence on that, Emma? I don't want to.
So I think in the NHS there are ways to progress as a music therapist where you become a manager and things, but because it's still we're still finding our feet as a profession a little bit. So there aren't that many routes that you can forge your way if you're really determined.
That's great. Thank you so much, Emma. That's so fascinating. And hopefully this helps people learn a bit more about what a music therapist does, because like you said, there's a lot of myths and people don't know much about it. And I think everyone would agree the power of music and how it impacts us on our mood and mental health, definitely, especially during the pandemic, again, I think helped lots of people survive. So thank you so much. One thing I'm mindful of is at the end, we're going to signpost people to the Psychological Professions Network, which will provide lots of details about each of these roles. The only thing is in the Psychological Professions Network, they don't cover arts therapists. So if people wanted to get more information about music therapy, where do they need to look and go to?
You need to go to BAMT, the British Association of Music Therapy.org, BAMT.org, and that's on the little slide that Lauren's shared in the chat as well.
Amazing. That's fantastic. And you've got that as well. So do note the slide that you've put in. Thank you so much for your time and thank you for being here. And if there's any questions at the end, I'll direct them to you when we have that time. Fantastic. Thank you, Emma. Wonderful. So we're doing okay with time. So our next speaker is Fumi, who is a clinical associate psychologist. And many of you might know that this is one of the newer roles in the psychological professions. And I'll hand over to Fumi to talk a little bit about that. And I know we have quite a few questions for this role, so we will leave some time at the end to make sure we answer some of them as well. Over to you, Fumi.
Okay, thank you so much, and hi everyone. Okay, so as mentioned, I'm a clinical associate psychologist, and it's quite a new role. So what it looks like in my role is that, I work with clients who have complex emotional needs. So this could be anything from, they're suffering from low mood, anxiety to trauma. They have difficulties with or be neurodiverse. Bipolar, so quite severe mental health illnesses as well. As a clinical associate psychologist within SLaM, we offer 6 to 18 weeks interventions, and that could be anything from group to one-to-one. How do you become a clinical associate psychologist? So my personal journey was I found the job post on NHS Jobs, and I was quite lucky at the time that my supervisor, who happened to be a clinical psychologist, pointed it out to me and said she thought that I'll be great for the role. So I applied, and with that job post, it does come with further training. So you end up being a trainee clinical associate psychologist, and you do get onto an MSc course that is roughly around 18 months. For the course, you do need to have a first degree in psychology and be BPS accredited. So you would have gained either, I think the minimum is a 2-2 for your first degree, or have done a conversion course to psychology. You also need to have some experience with working within, the NHS or a mental health service. So it could be anything like IAC or be a mental health support worker. Just as long as you have that experience of working with people who have mental health difficulties. You do, for this role, need to have English and maths as a GCSE, and would have need to attain an A to C grade. Okay, so what do I do day to day? So we get referrals from SPA, IAC, and the community mental health teams. So I do triages and screens for clients, which look like assessments. So actually speaking to the clients on the telephone, asking them what their difficulties are, and thinking about how our service can help and how we can support them. Because this is a new role, a lot of my work has been with the other CAPs in developing the secondary care pathway, and what that would look like within our service. I know in different services they have done different things, but mainly assessments, offering group work, one-to-one work, and our interventions are, DBT informed, CBT informed. I know that some people have done some structured clinical management as well, and other people have gone on to do MBTI as well. Yeah, so we often work with and liaise with the multidisciplinary team. So we have meetings with care coordinators, support workers, social workers, doctors, and talk about the client's journey and what would be best suitable for that client in terms of interventions. And we also support the team in, just thinking about their journey, thinking about what are the next steps, even if it isn't therapy. So what this person can do to help themselves feel a bit better. We get a lot of we also do, because we offer stepped care, of step care intervention. So what that looks like is our first point of contact is group therapy. And then clients can progress within the pathway to do things like MBT, DBT, further CBT or CAT, or trauma work, depending on their difficulties. We also help train and supervise assistant psychologists as well, and honorary assistant psychologists. So we do groups with them, and just generally helping them in terms of their career and, you know, working within the team. We also get a lot of supervision. So we get a lot of supervision from clinical psychologists, and that is in caring with our patients and thinking about what the next step for that patient will be as well, and also doing a lot of reflecting on our practice and how we work within the team. Okay, so what is it like? I guess the main thing is being able to kind of support people and validate their feelings. So the kind of the skills that you will need to have is being resilient, being able to kind of problem solve, being empathetic, and also just being yourself. I think a lot of the time people think about psychology and they think of us as, you know, being maybe cold or not having a personality, but absolutely you have a personality, and this is what helps you kind of engage with other people. Challenges, time management. You know, you do get a lot of cases which can be quite complex, and you wear a lot of hats. So you do a lot of leadership roles in terms of working with the team and then thinking about a client's journey. So you do have to learn how to organize your time and manage your time better. You do have difficult conversations with clients. A lot of the times clients will disclose, you know, maybe traumatic things that's gone on in their past or that they're currently going through. So you also need to learn how to kind of take care of yourself and be a bit compassionate to yourself and the client as well. And then a bit about progression, because I know that was quite important. So after you finish the course, it takes 18 months, and then once you complete your EPA, which is essentially like a Viber, so you do like at least 4 interviews, and then once you pass that, you can go on to get a band 6 qualified CAP role and working within the team. Now, I know some people have gone on to do further training, so that could have been in CBT or DBT. I know that it also varies in each trust as well. I know that some CAPs that are doing or working with children, hiya, I've got 1 minute. Yeah, I know that some CAPs who are working with children, their progression might look a bit different. But what I want you to hold in mind is what you want to do, and think about when you're having appraisals with your supervisor or your tutor on the course, think about how that aligns, how the CAP role might align with that, and what other things that you can do going forward. But yeah, it's very much in development, so watch out for this space as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for doing that to time. That's really, really interesting and exciting role. And I know you and your peers in the CAPS roles are pioneers, really pushing the role forward. And there's challenges with that, but I think there's always teething problems at the beginning of any new role, but it's something that is definitely valued by the services you're all working in. I can see the impact, and I think the service users and clients are finding it impactful as well. And we'll be evaluating that also in SLaM, and I thought many other NHS trusts will be doing similarly. So I'm sure you'll be hearing more in time as well. So thank you, Fumi. Time to have a break. So our last but not least speaker is Philippe, who is going to be speaking about being a family therapist, who's a very experienced family therapist in one of the teams I work in for my clinical days. So over to you, Philippe. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Robert. You can see the experience in the grey hair, so I'll try to keep my journey short. The first thing I want to say is that family therapy, as in spite of the name, is not just about family families. Yeah, for me, family therapy is about facilitating a conversation between people, and it's focusing on relationships between people. So sometimes it means working with the whole family, sometimes it means working with friends and a professional network. And if I give you an example of my day yesterday, so I work with a 17-year-old who's been struggling with self-harm, who has been talking to me about her sexuality and finding it difficult to talk to her mom, who is very Christian Nigerian woman, who found it very difficult to accept her daughter's sexuality. So some of the work that I'm doing is working with them and also with the social worker to find a way of talking, having those difficult conversations. And I suppose I should have said that my role at the moment is working in CAMS. So there are family therapists who work with adults in all sorts of different fields. So my experience has been mostly with children and families. So I will focus a bit more of that, but I'm happy to answer any questions later about other work. Like some of my colleagues that you've heard before, family therapists can also do some work in school. So the other thing I was doing yesterday is working in a PRU where a young 15-year-old that had hit a teacher and was going to be excluded. And when I met with her, I realized that there was probably some autism traits. And then when I started having more conversation with her, realized that she had been worried about being autistic herself. Her mom had been worried that she might be autistic too, because they have a friend who is autistic. And my role was, again, to facilitate those conversations and help the teachers, the parents, and the young person look at her behavior differently. So she was no longer the naughty child that needed to be excluded. She was the child that had sensory sensitivities that needed a lot more support than she had been getting. So it's that sort of focus on relationship that I really love and enjoy and find helpful. And in terms of my journey, I think in our job in psychotherapy, it's important for us to think about our motivation, and it often has some roots in our own families. And my motivation, I think, looking back, was that my brother was anorexic growing up, my younger brother, and I couldn't help, I couldn't do anything. And I ended up coming to England and not being able to help and feeling guilty. And I think a lot of my work in the last few years have been trying to help other families because I couldn't help mine. And recognizing that motivation, I think, is really important. My first step into the work was starting with youth work, and then I became a home care worker in Hackney, working with older people in their own home. And it was at a time when the local authorities were still able to support people to do the social work training. So I was seconded by Hackney to do the social work training, and then worked as a social worker. And my drive to do family therapy was that I wanted to be a better social worker. I wanted to know how to work with whole families, because a lot of our training focused on working just with individuals. So I think I wanted to have some better ways of working. And also that the family therapy training is quite flexible. I'll tell you a little bit about how to get there, but it's a very part-time training that is very practice-led, which attracted me, because by then I hadn't been to university. I just did the social work training. So I started on the family therapy journey. Some of the things I loved about the training is that the family therapy used a model called systemic thinking, and being systemic is like a way of being. It's like a way of looking at the world that focuses on relationships rather than individual. And it places a lot of emphasis on diversity, culture, emotions, and trying to have genuine conversations with people. And one of the things behind the theory is the concept of circularity, which means that when you're thinking about human beings, it's very hard to think about causality. It's very rare that you find the cause of what's happened. And very often when families come to CAMS, young people will come and say, what's wrong with me? They want a diagnosis. And what we try to do in family therapy is to turn that around and say, well done for getting here. How was it coming here? Can't have been difficult, can't have been easy to get here. What can we do now to work together with your family, with your friends, with your network, to understand how you got into this mess, how you have survived it so far, and how we can work together to thrive in the future. So for me, that really fitted with my way of thinking and my way of working. So if I think a bit about the routes to get into family therapy, it's good to look at it in 2 stages. So the first 2 years is a very part-time, so it's like a half a day a week, maybe a day a week of studying when you are working, and you do a certificate and a diploma that leads to you becoming a systemic practitioner. And you can work in CAMS and in social care as systemic practitioners. In CAMS, there are now some recruit to train posts where we're specifically recruiting people to go on to the systemic practitioners training with CYPIAP at King's. Then once you've done the 2 years, then the next step is doing the MSc. And the MSc is a 2-year course. Again, it's the equivalent of 1 day a week, where you are doing half a day of lectures and half a day of clinical work in a placement with a team of 4 colleagues and a supervisor who work with a one-way mirror. So it's very practice-based and fun. Learn a lot about yourself, learn a lot about relationship, and it's a great training. To get in those courses, so to get into the systemic practitioners training, the first 2 years, it's life and practice experience. To get into the MSc and to be qualified, it's helpful to have another profession. So I trained as a social worker before becoming a family therapist, and there are psychologists who train in family therapies, doctors, nurses, but I think from the stage you are at, the first step will probably be the clinical practitioner. I'm putting a link on the web, on the message from the Association of Family Therapy that will give you all the information that you need about how to access courses, where they are. So good luck.
Thank you so much, Philippe. Well done, getting it all done in time as well. Thank you so much for being so open and honest about your experiences and bringing yourself into it. I think that's so important. And I think with the psychological professions, there are many reasons what attract us as individuals into the professional roles we choose. So thank you for bringing that in and for explaining the career steps, because that's really helpful to know. So that's the 4th and final speaker for today for part 1. We now have moving to the kind of question time section. So I'm going to just check in with Lauren and Anissa, who have been manning the Slido link, which is where you've been able to put questions in. How is that looking?
Lots of different questions. So Sarah, but I've just sent you all the questions. And I've organised them. Or would you like me to go through them instead? Would that be easier?
Would it be Is that what you just sent me? Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
They're all
That's
organised in terms of profession for you too.
super helpful. Thank God for people who are IT savvy. Thank you. So the first question is, we'll do about 8 minutes of this, and then last 2 minutes we'll wrap up and we'll say about feedback and etc. So the first question is for you, Jess. So I wonder whether, if Lauren, you can highlight maybe the 4 speakers for us, that would be wonderful. So Jess, the question is education mental health practitioner trainee positions only available in England? I have looked for positions in Wales, however, they don't seem to offer any.
I'm not too sure.
I'm not too sure myself, actually, and I do have insights into some of the meetings that happen at a higher level of, and I think it is NHS England which is leading on it, but I am not sure about NHS Wales. I'm wondering whether this individual can contact anybody in NHS England potentially to find out, or
Yeah, I'm not too sure. Sorry about that. I'm not sure.
no, you haven't heard anything in Wales. Come to England.
Come to England.
That's the way forward. Sorry about that. Well, fingers crossed. I know with CAPS, for example, they started in Scotland. They have a different name title, and then they've moved. Then we have them in England now, but Scotland started. So things do kind of circulate and move across the different countries. So the next question for you is, Jess, is do you have to fund the university course yourself, or do the NHS fund it as part of your role?
It's all funded as part of our role.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, so I don't have to pay anything. Everything was paid for me.
Very
so I started.
good.
I actually forgot to say, whilst you're training, you're at band 4.
Yeah.
And then when you qualified, you're at band 5.
Yeah.
But if you live in London, you get the extra London
inner
living.
London waiting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on which borough you're working in, absolutely. And just to remind you, everybody, I've put in the chat the Psychological Professions Network link, which has a careers map, which is super helpful. And it's got each of the roles, so you can select educational mental health practitioner. It'll give you details of the qualifications you need, the journey, etc. So do have a look at that. The final question for you, Jess, is I have an MSc in occupational psychology. Can I get into an EMHP role? I currently work as an admin for an organisation called Find. I'm not sure what Find is, but yeah, occupational psychology. Can I get into?
I think it's more about experience, I would say. So probably, yeah, but do you have the experience to kind of showcase and highlight to yourself that you're for this role? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would just say experience. Obviously, it's really good to have your degree and to have your master's, etc., but they really want to see, like I said, real life examples of when you've done X, Y, and Z, when you've helped a child, when you've had to, yeah. So I'd say experience is really important.
And I would just say, and just Jess, where jobs are advertised on NHS Jobs, are they? I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah.
NHS
so on
jobs,
NHS Jobs, with most jobs, you'll have a job description, a person specification. So when you're looking at it and looking at what essential criteria you have, that's where you can really tell if you've got enough or what's missing. So that's probably a good port of call if you're interested in.
I'd also say as well, set up like a reminder. Not a reminder. So like if the job pops up, it gives you a notification that the job comes up, because they go so quickly, as in within 24 hours, they'll probably shut it because so many people have applied. So
definitely recommend that for any NHS jobs. All of us do it, qualified or not. So yeah. Thank you so much, Jess. I think that's all the questions for you for the moment, the top questions.
Great.
So now over to you, Fumi. So Fumi, the first question is, what is the difference between working as a PWP, so that's a psychological wellbeing practitioner, which is a bit more of an established role, and a CAP, so a clinical associate psychologist?
Yeah, and I think that mainly depends on where you're placed. But in terms of the role itself, I know that PWPs deal with individuals with more low intensity. So that's like depression, anxiety. I know they do trauma work, but I think that's for the actual trauma therapists within those teams to do those work.
Yeah.
With CAPS, you're working mainly in secondary care, and you're working with people who have complex emotional needs. So you'd have a range of difficulties. So you'll have people with serious mental health issues. They might have bipolar, psychosis. They could also be self-harming. So you would vary in terms of the type of intervention. So you're doing more DBT informed work, you're doing CBT. yeah, so just a range, I guess it's in terms of the range of work that's offered.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? The range of interventions?
No, you've explained that well. And again, I would direct you to the PPN network website again to look at both PWPs and CAPs just to see a bit more detail about the two different roles. Off the top of my head, I think as in terms of bandings, and when you're training, you're a band 5 as a CAP, aren't you?
Yeah.
And then you
And then
qualify as a
progress to
band
6.
6. Yeah.
Yeah.
On PWPs, I've got a feeling it's slightly different. It's a shame we didn't get time to have a PWP here today, but please put things in feedback if you want more talks like this. The other question is, what experience and qualifications did you have prior to this role?
Oh, okay. So prior to this role, I had a first degree in psychology. I also had a MSc, well, a postgraduate degree in a mental health practice, and I also had an MSc in occupational psychology. But you don't need all of that. It was just me trying to find out, you know, what I wanted to do. And that's why I went through that route. But to be a CAP, you just need a first degree. And remember, when you're training as a CAP, you're getting an MSc. So don't feel pressured to get a master's. But if that's something that you want to do, go ahead and do it.
Fantastic. There are quite a few questions for you, Fumi, so I'm not going to get through them all. I'm going to ask you one more. But I'm wondering, Fumi, whether you would be okay for us to answer some of these questions after the webinar, and then we could email them out afterwards, potentially, if you have time. Some of the top ones here. One of the other questions is, which is particularly relevant, I'm just going to pick it because it's when are the CAPS roles for SLaM going to be advertised? So we are actually planning another webinar. Webinars are my life at the moment. So we're actually planning another webinar for Thursday, the 22nd of September from 6 to 7:30 about the CAPS role. So if you're interested in the CAPS role, when Lucy puts in the external link later, for if you want to join the external SLaM aspiring psychological professions email distribution list, all you do is put your email into that link and we will let you know about the details for the CAPS webinar coming up on the 22nd. But earmark it in your diaries for now. The webinar is just to talk about the roles. We're going to hear from some CAPS, and then the adverts for the jobs in SLaM will be coming out soon after that, September, October time. So just keep an eye out. But as someone said earlier, do set up your alerts on NHS jobs so you don't miss anything. I have a question so Fumi, I think that will be the last for you. Thank you so much. One for Philippe, before we just do some wrapping up, is can you go into family therapy as a clinical psychologist? Or do you have to do the MSc to work in family therapy settings?
As a psychologist, you probably can go straight to the MSc.
Yeah.
Because you can.
I believe you can. Yeah.
I can't remember the word for. Yeah, you can go straight. Yeah, what is it called? Prior
experience, I guess, because of the clinical psychology training, one's key strand is systemic practice. That probably is counting, and now the the current courses now, many of them are getting accreditation, formal accreditation, when they finish the 3-year doctorate as well. So, which is really positive. So you don't have to, you can get it as well.
That's accreditation of prior learning.
Fantastic.
Same with social work training. So if you do some of the social work training, they have the systemic 2 years incorporated in it. For example, the frontline training.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. There's more questions, but what we will do is, if we can, is when we send out the link with the recording and the feedback evaluation link, we can put any information from questions that are outstanding that are popular. Thank you so much to all our speakers. You have done amazingly well in just only 10 minutes of time to really show your passion, enthusiasm for your roles, give some insights and direct people to where they get more information. So thank you for volunteering. Honestly, it's been wonderful. Really interesting to hear your stories and your journeys. So as I've just said, what we'll do is at the end of today, we will put in a feedback link. So I don't know whether you're going to put that in now, Lauren and Nisa. Is that happening now or at the end? Because some people might not join for the second part, so they might be leaving now. So I wonder if we could put Nisa.
What we'll do is that we'll put everything in the end, but everyone will still have access to the chat, I think, because they'll get a notification from joining. We've just turned the chat off for now, just because we want to direct people to ask questions via the Slido.
Yeah.
Chat.
Amazing.
So we'll post all the links at the end of the webinar today.
Perfect. And the recording is going to be sent out with the links later as well. Is that right?
Yes, we'll send it out in due course. Yeah.
In due course. Amazing. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. For those of you who are just staying for part one, this is your time to kind of log off. If you're here to stay for part two, stay tuned. And I'm going to hand over to Lauren, Anissa, and colleagues from the Institute of Psychiatry Clinical Psychology Training course. Over to you, team. Thank you.
Thanks, Saraba, and thank you to all of the speakers for the first half of today's webinar too. It was really interesting for my own benefit to hear about what the other professionals do.
Absolutely, I echo that. It sounds like there's been lots of really interesting lots of different directions that we can go in with psychology and so many other professions out there. And hopefully this has given you a taste of some of them, but there are many, many more. So do have a look at the link that was posted earlier about the different psychological professions, because that will give you some good ideas. So for part two, Anissa and I are really pleased to introduce lots of trainees from the King's course, but also some trainees from other courses across London. And essentially what this part of the workshop is about is kind of thinking about the different experiences that we have prior to coming onto the doctorate in clinical psychology, and how we can apply some of that prior learning into our application and into our, our practice as a trainee. So this might be helpful for some of you who are thinking of taking some of those non-traditional routes. So other routes except from AP, support worker, but they will also be mentioned today. So there are a never-ending number of options for you all. So I guess, as I mentioned earlier on, the Increasing Access Committee is a trainee-led committee that's run within the King's College London course. And our aim is to try to increase diversity within the profession of clinical psychology. And we do this with talking to the course and also connecting with other courses across London and the UK. And we run roughly monthly to monthly workshops on all areas related to clinical psychology, how to get into it, the application process, the interview process, race within psychology, different avenues into psychology like today, and also kind of things about like disability in psychology, and just kind of trying to show people that there are lots of different ways, and yeah, there is no one set way onto training. So many of us have had lots of different routes. I myself, as you heard, I'm a second year. I came from a research background. I have had no AP experience. Anissa, do you just want to quickly say what you did prior to training?
Yep, I am the complete opposite of Laura. I came from a AP background with lots of clinical experience, but zero research experience. I'm wondering, Lauren, if before we start introducing our first speakers, should we just, all of our trainees here today could just turn their cameras on, and we'll do a quick round of introductions.
Yeah.
Or maybe you can turn them on as I'm going to just shout out. I'm going to do this awkward thing where we're going to shout out names, because we're going to have that awkward silence if we go in order. So let's start with Alistair.
Hi everyone, I'm Alistair. I'm a third year trainee at the King's College.
And actually, maybe what we can do is we can also just briefly mention what you're going to talk about today as well.
Yes, now I'll be talking about, I trained as a CAP before coming onto the course. Actually up in Scotland, so slightly different from Fumi, so I'll talk about that.
Thanks, Alistair. Ben?
Hi everyone, I'm Ben. I'm a second year going into third year clinical psychology trainee at the Institute of Psychiatry. I'm going to be talking about the research PhD route into training, which I took.
Thanks, Ben. Natalie?
Hi everyone, this is Natalia. And like Ben, and then you and Lauren as well, I'm a second year trainee at IUP. and I'm moving on to the third year soon. So I will be speaking about the international route into training.
Thank you. Hannah.
Hiya, I'm a second year trainee at Royal Holloway, and I'll be speaking about my journey to getting onto training.
And Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela. I'm a first year trainee at UCL. I'm also going to be talking about the experience I had coming in and my key takeaways, I guess, from that journey.
And finally, Vicky.
Hi, I'm Vicky. I'm a first year trainee clinical psychologist at King's. So I'm not going to be speaking directly today, but I'll probably add some reflections for any experiences that other people have as well.
Thank you all. So Lauren, is there anything else to say, or should we get started?
We will also, just towards the end, also have a brief talk from Saraba as well, as a qualified clinical psychologist, to tell us a little bit, about what she does in her role, because many people on this call might be hoping to become clinical psychologists one day. So yeah, it would be great to hear from Saraba about what she actually does as part of that role.
Thanks, Lauren. I completely forgot Saraba. Apologies. But Saraba doesn't need introduction, as I'm sure you all know her already. What we're going to do is we will ask if questions could be submitted using the same Slido link that's within the chat. Lauren and I will keep a track of these. Each of the trainees are going to have around 5 minutes or so to speak. Some might speak for slightly longer, some might speak for slightly shorter. That's okay. And we'll leave all of our questions to the end. And I think that's it in terms of our housekeeping. So maybe let's get started with Alistair.
Thanks, Anisha and Lauren. Yes, I'm going to talk about my route onto training. So I started off actually doing with an economics degree for my undergraduate. I had that classic thing of where you've got to decide what degree you want to do when you're 16, 17, and you don't really know what. So I thought, why not work in money to kind of make money, and that's what will kind of fulfill me. And I think while I was starting to do that economics degree, it really dawned on me that that's actually not what I wanted to do, and wanted something a little bit more kind of fulfilling and kind of meaningful. And particularly, I was most interested in the part about economics, which was all about human behavior. So that kind of led me down the path to do a psychology conversion degree. And while I was doing that kind of 1 year conversion degree, I heard everyone talking about the doctorate, talking about clinical psychology. It was something that I hadn't really kind of heard about before. And the more I learned about it, the more I kind of found out about it, I got really interested in the idea of trying to follow that kind of route. It seemed to blend a lot of the things I enjoyed in terms of having a kind of a research kind of element, but also actually getting to kind of work with people and trying to kind of help people who've been through their own kind of difficulties. And that particularly appealed to me because I had my own mental health difficulties during my undergraduate. So I guess I wanted to be able to give back and help others through kind of difficult times that I've been through myself. So after I finished my kind of 1 year conversion course, I was then in that point where I was kind of fumbling around trying to kind of work out how to get onto the clinical psychology doctorate. So I kind of naturally went into, which I think a lot of people do, naturally went into kind of support work. So I thought it would be great to get some experience actually working with people that have been struggling with kind of mental, kind of physical health kind of problems. So I worked for 6 months in an older adult support worker role, and then kind of 6 months working as a support worker with people with serious mental health illness, doing community support. And it was kind of during that time, I was living in Scotland, and again, I kind of like stumbled across finding out about the clinical associate and applied psychology courses that they had in Scotland at the time. This is what I think about 5 or 6 years ago. So back then they didn't have those courses in England. And it seemed to again be kind of the perfect measure of in Scotland, the CAP courses are 1 year long. And you do a kind of a 1 year placement alongside then doing a systematic review piece of research. And I think in Scotland you're paid at band 6 rather than band 5 during training. I'm assuming that's still the case. Take all of my information with a bit of a caveat, as like I said, it's about 5 years, 5 years out of date. And I was lucky enough to apply and get onto the CAP course. And that was a really great experience. It was quite an intense year of training, because one, it was getting to the grips of learning how to deliver therapy, which was something that was completely kind of new to me. Obviously, I had a chance of working with people through support work, but not within that kind of therapeutic setting. The course is very much focused around kind of CBT techniques for kind of mild to moderate anxiety and depression. So it sounds like that slightly differs from the English version as well. And I was lucky enough to get placed. I think it was the first time they'd done a placement in a physical health setting. So I was working in a weight management service at the time, of offering therapy to people with binge eating disorder, but also people who were struggling with depression and anxiety that was linked to their obesity. After I kind of qualified that, which was a 1-year course, I because of my experience of working with people with binge eating disorder, I was lucky enough to get a post as a psychological therapist in a specialist eating disorder service. And I worked there for 18 months while I was applying to get onto the clinical psychology course. I think now you have to have 2 years post qualification from an NHS funded course to now apply for it. It actually ended up taking me 18 months to get onto the course. And I'm really thankful for that time as being able to work as a psychological therapist. I remember when I first qualified, I felt like I really wanted to get on the course quite quickly and get on with kind of training. But I'm really glad that my first application wasn't successful. That extra 8 to 12 months in the role really allowed me to feel a lot more comfortable in kind of offering kind of CBT. It also allowed me within my kind of post to start to be introduced to some compassion focused and acceptance commitment kind of approaches. And I think I just felt more comfortable in my core skills as a therapist to then start the doctorate, which can be an overwhelming thing in itself. So I felt I had something to be able to fall back on and make use of. So yeah, I found the kind of the CAP role a kind of amazing route to take. Felt like I got a lot of experience and a lot of kind of training in the build up to clinical psychology, this clinical psychology doctorate. And there is that benefit of being kind of funded to do that as well, and also getting the chance, if you really like to be able to do that kind of research and therapy side, is an opportunity to be able to do that. I think there's the main things about my route on the course. And yeah, I'll be interested at the end to kind of answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Alistair. It sounds like you had a really interesting journey, and as we were saying before, everyone takes kind of really different routes. And for you, kind of doing a conversion course, that is a slightly kind of less traditional route, which is great to show that it can be done. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing, and we'll have some time at the end for questions. But for now, I would like to introduce my colleague Ben, who's going to tell us a bit about his research experiences prior to psychology.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ben, and I'm going to be talking about my route into the doctorate, which was sort of a bit different from Alistair's. I had originally no intention of applying to the doctorate until sort of maybe a couple of years before I actually made the application. I originally, when I was doing my psychology degree at undergrads, I was very lucky. I got the opportunity to do a placement year as part of that course. And in that year, I worked as a student research assistant within a forensic mental health service. And I think at the time, I really enjoyed that role. And subsequently looking back on it, I think it was such a helpful experience for me, because it was my first real experience of working with mental health service users, of working in clinical research. It was a role which primarily was focused on various research projects I was helping with at the time, but it was embedded within an inpatient service. It was that the research was patient facing. It was a really good blend and what I needed at the time of the sort of the research side of a psychology role, as well as the sort of the clinical aspects. But that really set me on a route of, for one reason or another, I really enjoyed the research that I was involved in. I had to sort of be wrenched away from that placement and brought back to uni, because I would have loved to have just carried on. And I sort of decided at that point that this clinical research route is where I want to be, where I want to end up, sort of contributing to the evidence base. That was a really it was a really nice experience to have on placement. It was what I could just imagine myself doing at the time, I suppose. After I graduated in 2016, I applied and was lucky enough to get a research assistant role at the IOPPN. So I was working in the psychology department. The specific role was a bit different from other RA roles. It wasn't so much a single project that I was working on. It was a bit more varied, which at the time I wasn't sort of sure about. And in retrospect, I think it provided so many helpful experiences for actually getting onto the doctorate and sort of working post-qualified, which I'm very lucky to have. This again was a project that was again patient facing. It was embedded within clinical services, but it also combined other aspects such as service user involvement. So I was lucky to be involved in facilitating several of the PPI groups within the trust, which was my first experience of service user involvement and the value of it. It also provided other sort of research opportunities around sort of publications and data analysis and whatnot. Following that, I was lucky enough to get a PhD opportunity, again at the IAPPN, working within forensic mental health. And it was sort of during the PhD that I really began to sort of consider the doctorate a bit more than I had done previously. So it'd sort of been on my radar. I knew it was a sort of role that existed, and it was very competitive. Up to that point, I'd really been sort of focused on the research side of things, and I think possibly maybe a year in, maybe a little bit more into my PhD, I sort of had a sort of moment of reflection where I was thinking about, can I see myself going down the sort of the academic route and all of the opportunities and also challenges that brings, and also just thinking about what I'd actually enjoyed in all of the roles I'd had up to that point, in addition to the research. And I found that at that time it was really the time that I was spending with service users and carers, the assessments, the interactions with team members. That was what really stood out as the more memorable, the sort of the highlights of those roles, more so than time spent at a desk crying over statistics and publications, which sometimes happens still. So I had this sort of well, it felt like a bit of a sort of shifting gears of considering whether I could maybe kind of go down that clinical psychology route. And at the time, there was a lot of uncertainty in my mind about whether any of those experiences I'd had up to that point were actually relevant, if they would kind of transfer over. And I know some sort of questions in the Slido about that. And I guess sort of my route into it shows that actually through these research roles, through this PhD approach, through this kind of considered maybe a non-traditional route into clinical psychology, there's so much transferable skills and experiences that lend themselves to the doctorate. Just looking at the sort of the application requirements in clearinghouse, you can see how those roles, those experiences really do sort of transfer over to the clinical doctorate. So it was a moment of actually kind of, I guess, overcome my own uncertainty about whether you can go from what seems like a very different role into clinical psychology. So I definitely sort of encourage those of you that have come from that background to sort of have a sort of look at how those experiences do actually carry over quite nicely into the role. I think that was my time up for my slot.
Thanks.
But very
Thanks,
happy
Ben.
to answer questions later.
Thank you so much, Ben. And it's really lovely to hear. I've always heard your story, and it's nice to hear it again, because we actually did our placements together at the same hospital, and I always find it really interesting how Ben went on to do the research side and I went down to continue on the clinical side, yet we both ended up back together on the same course, which really, I think, shows how you can have so many different routes and still get onto training. Next up, we have Natalie.
Can you see me?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect.
So I'll turn my camera back on to give you a warning that your time is running out.
Okay, thanks. So basically, I echo a lot with Ben, with a lot of what he said about the research path in a way, because that's what I experienced as well. But in the beginning, before finishing high school in Lebanon, so that's where I come from, I explicitly said that I will not go into the clinical psychology route. So that was the plan, to never ever go into the clinical psychology route. And that was mainly because of the responsibility that comes with it. But from the beginning as well, I knew that I wanted to work with the human brain. So eventually I did a double major as an undergrad in Beirut, in Lebanon, in both nutrition and psychology. And I started working in research from the beginning. So since I started both of my degrees, but I worked mainly with animal models within health psychology and neuroscience as well. I then, after a few years, I went on to work in neuropsychology, but with humans in one of the American research centers. And there I would administer different cognitive measures in Arabic, conduct various mood assessments. There were a few clinical trials for different therapeutic modalities. But again, I wasn't really involved in delivering therapy because I wanted to stay away from that. So I did not want to be a clinician. However, my research participants at that time were telling me that I should go into the clinical route as well. I'm not sure why, but they said that I kind of made them feel at ease in the clinic and things were running smoothly, and they felt that they can easily open up to me when it comes to many things. So during that time, I focused a lot on developing my own cognitive tests with my colleagues, which is something that I'm still passionate about. And I had different jobs in research. So I worked as a research assistant in the beginning, and then I became one of the senior researchers in Beirut. But I've always known as well that I wanted to travel outside of Lebanon and to study in the UK. So because I'm not from here, my goal was to gain as many experiences abroad before applying to a master's degree. So I went to the States for a while, attended some workshops. I went to different parts of the world for various conferences. And I tried to collaborate in research with as many people as possible from outside of Lebanon, and not to be limited to that region in a way, because it's really hard to get out from Middle Eastern countries to study further abroad. So I applied to Bristol for the master's in applied neuropsychology, and I got full scholarship. and I came to the UK for the first time. I studied for 1 year, I did very well, and I went back to Lebanon. So I went back to research, I went back to the community work that I've always been involved in, and I went back to being an activist. And again, my research participants were telling me, Natalie, please go into the clinical route as well. And I remember in my master's that I was hearing from my colleagues there about the decline side, but I never really looked fully into it because I didn't want to go into the clinical field. But then I started listening more to my research participants, and I said, why not? So I applied to King's, I got accepted, and I managed to secure full funding as well. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is just to acknowledge that securing funding as an international trainee can a lot of the times be the barrier in terms of coming to the UK and training here. So just to note a few things that I included in my Deakin Sci application that might be a little bit different for an international trainee. So one of the things that I leveraged a lot was basically the people that I worked with, the ethnically, racially, and culturally super diverse, whether it's patient groups or refugees coming from different places in the world. I worked with quite culturally bound abstract concepts like fatalism, and I published a lot in that area. So essentially in my application, what I tried to do was to bring in my experience from this cross-cultural lens, and it is something that I'm still quite active in my current training. The second thing that I brought into my application was actually creativity, because during my work in Lebanon, I had to work with less than minimal resources. So I had to come up with a lot of different ways and creative solutions to get the job done, basically. And the third thing that I included in my application was honestly my own lived experiences and how I reflected on those and how I grew from those things and my role in them. So for example, the revolution that happened recently in Lebanon. So I did a lot of community work in that domain. I'll just end up on two notes. If you are planning to apply as an international trainee, so please don't underestimate the richness of your experiences, no matter where you're coming from. So make sure that you reflect all of the things that you're bringing in to the people here and make the most out of it. So please let your colors shine. I love that eventually I decided to go into the clinical route as well. And that was mainly because of the people that I used to work with.
Thank you, Natalie. It sounds like you've had some really rich experiences and you've been really good at putting yourself out there to get all of these, which is absolutely fantastic to hear. And for anyone who's listening who is from an international background, the IAC does often host workshops on being an international applicant for Declan Sci training. So have a look at our Eventbrite, check our the King's Declan Sci Twitter as well, and you'll be able to get some info about that when they happen. So thank you, Natalie. So next I would like to introduce to you the first of our non-King's trainees, which is quite a big deal for the IAC to introduce some new people. So I would like to introduce Hannah. I think it's who we've got next. Hannah, hello.
Can you hear me okay? Is my camera okay? My internet's a bit rubbish, so will you just shout at me if like I freeze or you can't hear me?
No problem. Can see you and hear you fine.
Perfect. So yeah, I'm a second year trainee at Royal Holloway, and I started my journey by I finished my undergraduate degree and I definitely couldn't afford a master's, but I did the SLV program. I assume it's still running, where you go to Sri Lanka. It's like volunteer. Well, I don't think they'll be in Sri Lanka now, but I'm sure the SLV program's still running. And then from there, I went traveling and lived in Australia for 2 years because I just wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then whilst I was in Australia, I got some experience in working in a doctor's with both doctors and psychologists because I was considering doing graduate entry medicine. And I was like, actually, no, it is the psychology that I want to do. So then when I knew that I wanted to do it, so I was always going to come home. I wasn't going to stay in Australia because if you qualify there, you can't necessarily practice here and lots of different complicated things. But I came back, and then my first job that I got was, it was called a rehabilitation co-therapist, but it was a support worker. And I worked on an inpatient unit. It was quite an eye-opener and quite shocking because I'd never worked in an environment like that before. It was for people with severe learning difficulties, ASD, and then we had different wards for brain injury, and everyone there had been sectioned under the Mental Health Act or come from prison and been sectioned in some way or the other. I was there for 18 months. It was very tough and emotionally draining, but I think that was one of the best things that prepared me for training. I think it was such a good experience, and I really did enjoy the job. Unfortunately, there was just like problems with staffing, which I think everyone's just used to. We shouldn't be, but yeah, I got some really, really good experience there, and I think compared to like being in a psychology department, being on the ward with patients, you get to spend so much time with them. You really understand them more. I'd say, because then whilst I was there, I did a secondment as an assistant psychologist for 3 months. And that I did that on the brain injury wards, and I used to work on the LD ward. And I just felt like I didn't get the patients like I did as a support worker. So I think it was really good to do that grounding first. And there's no way I got as good of experience when I was doing the assistant psych secondment. But I think, different roles have different benefits. And I guess the assistant psych role, the secondment got my foot in the door because pre that I'd applied for hundreds and hundreds. I was applying for like them every day, all day. I'd come home from work, I'd start applying again. It was draining, it was awful. And it's no reflection on you or your skills for anyone who's going through that or has been through that. It's just like they're like, we want experience of an assistant psych, and it's like, well, how can I get experience if no one's giving me the job in the first place? I think the 3 months secondment did get my foot in the door a little bit, and I was quite lucky with that. But alongside me doing that, I realised that I needed to kind of get some other things under my belt. So I then went to the university and spoke to someone, because I studied at Liverpool University. I was living in Liverpool, so I just got in touch with my old personal tutor, and she put me in touch with, she sent an email around saying, does anyone want any help on any research? She just wants to get some more experience. And I did that for about a year, just helped different people with projects at uni, and did like half a day on it a week, or sometimes a day if I had the time. But that was really good to get experience, and people are really grateful for your help. So if you can't get a research assistant post, or you want to big up that research experience and you can't afford a master's, I'd really recommend doing that, because it also takes up as much or as little of your time as you've got. So then whilst I was at the inpatient unit, I think I was just like, I can't do this for much longer. I'm in the same role. I need to get some new experience. And I went to a housing and homelessness charity. So I was working with people, and they had to hit 4 criteria, which was mental health problems, substance misuse, they'd been involved with the criminal justice system, and they were facing issues of homelessness. So really, really like severe end of the spectrum and very complex. And that was such an easy job to get compared to like the assistant psychs. But again, that was one of the jobs that I really got prepared for training and learned so much. And then after that, I did get finally like 3 years later, was it 2 years later, 2.5 years later, got an assistant psych role in a CAMHS eating disorder service. And that I also really loved that role. But I definitely would big up not just focusing on assistant psych roles, because I know that's what I did, and I really nearly killed myself applying and working 3 jobs and trying to do the research assistant thing. So I'd also say be really careful of burnout when you're trying to get onto training. Like, there isn't any rush. I know that's easy to say now you're on, but yeah, just make sure you look after yourself and take jobs that you're interested in.
Thanks, Hannah. Any final words, or we finished at my perfect timing that I put my camera on?
No, I was just, don't burn yourself out, and if you want to do some traveling and things like that, there's no rush, really.
Thanks so much. And I really remember like that burnout. I think I was in the very same situation as you, and I think if I had known back at that time that you didn't only have to have an AP position to get onto clinical training, I would have loved someone to have told me that. And I think that's why we're running this workshop today, because it was just so hard to get that first role and to get your step in the door. It's really, really difficult slog. So like, it's bringing back all the memories for me. And finally, we have Angela, who will be speaking about her experiences.
Hiya. So I'm Angela. I just wanted to start off with a really quick introduction about who I am. So I grew up with like a pretty middle class upbringing, quite standard. I'm a woman, I'm part of the LGBT community, and I'm also mixed race. So I'm Chinese and I'm English, and I'm the daughter of an immigrant. I just wanted to throw that in there because I think it's really important to think about different lived experiences and representation when it comes to psychology, which can, as we've all known, not be the most diverse place to be. In terms of the route that I took, I started out actually in school, kind of decided that I wanted to do psychology. I just loved working with people. I started out as an English tutor part-time on the side, and then when I went into my undergraduate in psychology, I picked up a part-time paid role with the National Autistic Society, which is a charity, and I was a support worker, so no experience needed at all. Went in and was working with children and young people with autism, just helping deliver after-school kind of clubs, focusing on social skills and emotional support and stuff like that. And I also had the opportunity to do a placement year. Unfortunately, it was unpaid, but I was working as an honorary assistant psychologist in the NHS. And I actually kept up my paid role on the side just to make it slightly more sustainable. So working in the evening sometimes with the NAS still, just to keep things going a little bit. And in the summers as well, I'd work with the National Citizen Service, which again, you don't need much experience. You can come in as a support worker, basically helping with really fun trips over the summer. And it's really good experience of working with lots of different people and lots of different needs. After I graduated, I also had this brain in my head that I needed to be an assistant. So I was applying like mad, couldn't find anything. And I ended up securing an AP post, luckily, but it was in private, which is something I never thought I would do. I was working for a locked rehab hospital for a year, and then kind of wanted to move on and got the opportunity to do a master's in clinical mental health. On that master's, you had the opportunity to get more clinical or research experience, but that was unpaid. And for me, I wasn't in a financial position to be able to take on more unpaid work, so I kind of rejected that. And instead, I just picked up some paid agency work as a teaching assistant in a special needs school. So I did that on like evenings, or not evenings, like on the days in between teaching and stuff, just to pick up some extra money to support me through the masters. And that was a really great experience. And after that, I then found an AP post within the NHS. So I worked in forensics for a year. So with that little overview of all of the stuff that I did, I thought I'd think about the key takeaways or the points. I think it's really important to think about how you view your experience and be really open-minded towards it. It is completely fine to be open about the field that you're in, the exact type of job you're doing, to need money. It's completely fine to ebb and flow between different types of roles. Like, as you can see, I went from like AP to teaching assistant to support worker, back to AP again, based on what you need and what's working in your life right now. You will learn from any of those experiences that you have. There will be transferable skills and values from all of them. So like, for example, I never thought I'd work in private services. I never thought I'd work in forensics, but actually that was so eye-opening when it came to thinking about the role of policy and economy and inequality when it comes to mental health. and when it comes to mental health systems. And also all of my part-time work that I did, even as an English tutor, as a support worker, that was where I got that real like grounding experience that fed me on for the rest of my training when it came to understanding real world problems, getting more sensitivity and compassion working with people from all different walks of life, understanding teamwork and communication. And that's how I kind of sold it in my application, thinking about all those different experiences and how they come together. And I also think that when it comes to gaining foot in door experiences, be thoughtful of what you need. Choose something sustainable, short hours, flexibility, agency. Think, like Hannah said, seeking out little opportunities where you can to like do some flexible work that's going to help you. I would also do like free training courses I found online. So even if you're doing a job right now that doesn't feel 100% relevant or clinical, you can keep up that training and that interest by finding some free clinical training online. And the field is really competitive. That's not about you. That is the field. Please don't internalize it as you. It's completely normal to like jump between lots of different roles and just keep going before you get anywhere, and just don't make it about you. It's not you, it's the field. Keep going, you're in the right place. And I think overall, just remembering that you're a whole person. You're not the doctorate. You can feel really rushed and pressured, but just take your time to actually invest in your values, your interests, your hobbies, your relationships. That's going to be what brings you forward. I think that's partially why I brought up my identity at the beginning. My own lived experiences was really helpful in my application and also in all of the work I've ever done to help me build connections with people, because that's what's really important in psychology. Investing time in hobbies, I spent loads of time making music, and now that's been really helpful because I can be really creative in my sessions. I can connect with service users and my colleagues through that. So I just guess what I advocate for is just thinking about everything you're already doing now, no matter what the label of the job is, no matter what the content is as training. You're already in training, whatever you're doing. Just think about right here, right now, what you're gaining, what you're learning. Because I think getting that real world experience and knowing the world and knowing yourself is going to be what's the most helpful for, I guess, your reflections when it comes to applications. I don't think it's about a list of all the jobs you did, a list of all the tasks you've done, a list of all the therapies you've done. It's more about what have I done? What have I enjoyed about this process? What have I learned and reflected on? And how can I bring that forward to feel like a well-rounded person? Because first and foremost, as a psychologist, you are a person that's working with people. So yeah, I guess advocating for definitely taking that view as much as possible.
Thank you so much, Angela. Some very wise words there. Just like you, I always kind of advocate, kind of keeping your boundaries, not losing sight of who you are, keeping that perspective as well, and remembering that the doctorate, if that's what people want to go for, is not the end point. That is just another step in the journey. So we should try to take every opportunity we can to, kind of improve ourselves, improve our professional selves as well. So yeah, thank you so much, Angela. So finally, before we have a little bit of Q&A time, I wanted to introduce Saraba. So as I said, many of you might be thinking of doing declin psy training in the future, and many of us are on training. So now we can hear a little bit from Saraba about what that's actually like, and what she does as part of her job. Thanks, Saraba.
That's great. Thank you, Lauren. So hi, everyone. So great to hear such diverse, different experiences about routes into psychology. I think I just want to make a comment on that because it's definitely in my, I'm a clinical psychologist, but I'm also I hold a role called psychological workforce lead in SLaM, which really helps focus on the early workforce. And I think what's really positive at this time in the field is there's so many more options and routes into psychology and psychological professions, and which you can see and that are highly valued. So I think it's a really great time for the profession and psychological professions as a whole. So I think it was really helpful to hear from Hannah about the AP burnout, because I remember my early journey involved being an AP. and I thought that was the only route. So it's just so refreshing that there's lots of different options available. Still competitive, I completely can see that, but at least there's a few more different options and routes, and the courses also value the differences and diversity of applicants, perhaps in a way more so that I feel than when I was in that journey, early stages of my career. I think as Angela was talking about her lived experience, I was thinking to bring that in as well, because my experience, I came to the UK as an asylum seeker. I was one when I came to the UK, come from a low income background, and all those experiences have made me the psychologist, the clinical psychologist I am. When I was applying to the course, I don't feel, for me at that time, that lived experience, that individuality was really drawn upon or really valued or felt valued. Whereas now, linking specifically with the IOP and SLaM courses, which I can speak to a bit more because my role links with those courses, but wider courses are similar. They really value that experience and the different experiences that people have. So I'd really agree with that. In terms of my role, so a clinical psychologist, I'm sure you have all done a bit of reading about it. It's really diverse. I think what's wonderful about it is I'm a bit greedy. I like to do a bit of everything, and I get to do that in my role. So my background is CAMS, so Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services is where I've worked. And that role involves lots of different parts to it, and these are transferable to different clinical psychology roles. So there's usually involved in assessments of some kind. You're involved in providing treatment. So CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, is kind of the bread and butter treatment, that one of the treatments I provide, as well as more recently in the last few years, EMDR. So that's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And my specialism is PTSD and trauma work, so post-traumatic stress disorder. Sorry, there's lots of acronyms. So that's my specialism. And in my current role with the psychological workforce lead role, I do one day that's clinical, and the other role is the psychological workforce role, which is leadership. So thinking about clinical psychology roles, there's usually the clinical side of the work. So that might be the assessments, the treatments, the triaging. You could be working in inpatient services, so in hospitals, or you could be working more likely in the community. I was working in the community, and in my role, you work with a team, which is something I particularly valued. So lots of different people in my team, such as family therapists, psychiatrists, nurses, etc., which is wonderful and something I particularly find helpful. You're also doing things like audit and research. So it depends on what your passion is and what your area of interest is. And you're really thinking about formulation. One of the skills we have is really in your training is around formulating and understanding. That means understanding an individual's current circumstances and bringing into account their differences, their diversity, their history, their context, their journeys. And that's a particular skill I think we have as a clinical psychologists, and helping others, professionals in the team, to help understand and piece together what's going to be most helpful for that client's onward journey in the NHS in terms of their treatment plan. And another, I guess the biggest part I want to just focus on, because my role is a little bit different, is the psychological workforce role, because it's leadership. So leadership is another huge area, I would say, as a clinical psychologist, that's really, really, really important to focus on, and it's growing role in our profession. My role is a really classic example of that. The psychological workforce role is a relatively new role. I started it last year in SLaM. These roles are in other trusts as well. And my role is leadership. I'm managing projects across the trust, like certain schemes you might have heard of, like the Aspiring Clinical Psychologist scheme or the Work Experience scheme. It involves working with multiple people, organisations, using project management approach. So I'm drawing on a lot of different skills. It's not clinical. So that's a really important point, that it's not always clinical. So I think it's important to know there's lots of different opportunities in the clinical psychology role. You don't have to be fixed. So if you're greedy and want a bit of everything, clinical psychology is probably for you. And you can pick and choose what your passion is, and the 3-year training helps you, direct you, and decide what you want to do. Because the anaesthetist, I'm aware of your time, but I think it's just from my psychological workforce role, it's a really positive time. There's an increase in training places for clinical psychology trainees, so you probably are aware of that over the last few years. There's a real drive to increase access to psychological therapies, including clinical psychology. So go for it if you're thinking to apply, and hopefully we'll be doing more webinars to support that in the future. So thank you. Whistle stop tour, sorry about that. That's okay.
Thank you so much. It's really interesting to hear actually about what a clinical psychologist does, because I'm not actually sure if I've ever had someone actually tell me what a clinical psychologist does. I think it's always just been assumed that I would know. But that was really, really helpful. What I might ask now is for all of the trainees to put their cameras on, and we'll do a bit of a Q&A session. We've got about 10 minutes. So what I'll do is I'll just read out the questions from the top of the list. So the top of the list is those which are the most popular. Feel free to chip in, maybe just unmute yourself and we can just have a bit of a discussion. So the first question is there a way to get valuable clinical experience whilst in another full-time role? For example, this person's currently in research, or should they move to a full-time, part-time role in a new area? What would people say? I'm aware that we can't answer these specifically, but we'll just give general tips.
From my experience, it was some of the research roles that I've had, depending on the projects, were counted as clinical experience. So yeah, that was my case, and I know that there are many other people who had the same profile in a way.
I know for me, when I was doing the honorary work and needed some money, I was doing part-time work in the evenings. That was clinical, I guess clinical adjacent, like with the National Autistic Society. There are lots of like charity sector roles where there are evening work and weekend work where you don't need to dedicate huge amounts of your time, because again, you don't want to burn yourself out. But once or twice a week, maybe, that you can do a few hours and get that kind of person-facing clinical experience with people.
Yeah, it's similar to Natalie. There are aspects of the sort of the research role which do sort of count for that experience, but also similar to Angela, during my PhD, I was able to find some volunteering experience with local CAMs in SLaM. In my case, that was sort of unpaid and had to take place kind of outside of the hours of my PhD. So it's a kind of an individual decision around obviously the kind of the additional workload and the financial burden that brings. I do kind of remember the that experience of looking at my kind of research experience and having a feeling that I needed to get some more. So there are opportunities out there if you have sort of kind of local contacts who could sort of perhaps point you in the right direction as well.
Thanks, everyone. Anyone else want to say a final few words before I move on?
I was just going to say, I think it's important to think about obviously your financial circumstances in that question. I mean, I don't know, that sounds like that post was paid for, and people's circumstances are different, and we want to make sure we're attracting people from different backgrounds, including low-income backgrounds. So I think it is very personal. In my history, I did volunteer, and I did do things outside of paid jobs to make ends meet as well. But I think there are different schemes are available for people from low-income backgrounds, like the Aspiring Clinical Psychologist scheme, for example. There's not enough, but there are kind of things like that to think about. And I think my point would be that I remember feeling like I needed lots of different things to pick up, but actually what I would say is less can be more if you're doing it well and you're really gaining it. So choose, if you're going to volunteer, don't feel like you have to do hundreds of things. Choose one thing, do a limited hours, but really try and throw yourself in that, really understand that, and really, does that make sense? So it feels manageable. I think there can be that myth that you need to do hundreds of different things. I definitely felt that earlier on in my career. So yeah, just wanted to throw that in.
Thanks, Rafa. Those are wise words. I think it's so true. It's quality rather than quantity sometimes in terms of your experiences. I'm actually just going to bump up a question because I think it's a really important question. How do you deal with the hopelessness of trying to get onto training and in this field that is predominantly white and privileged? I think that's an absolute great question. So the floor is open.
I think that something that I always had in mind is it is a very white and privileged environment to be working in. And I think it's remember what your values are and why you want to become a psychologist, what are you going to bring. We've all talked today about how you can bring your own lived experience and identity and difficulties into this role. And I think it's about reminding yourself that your lived experience as someone that may hold less privilege is going to make you probably even a better psychologist than the model that we've all been showed to be the best. I think a lot of people get imposter syndrome because they're like, well, I can't be that because I don't identify that as I haven't had those experiences. But actually, your experience will make you a better psychologist. You will bring those insights into every single interaction you have with service users. So just remind yourself of that you will be the best that you can be because of your experience. And that's what we need more of in this field.
Yeah, I'll just jump in a little bit following what Angela said, and I'll be quick. I completely understand that question. I think a lot of us can relate to it on so many different levels. I come from an underprivileged background, and actually for a while I was hopeless. I was homeless and I was hopeless. And at some point I had to work 3 full-time jobs at the same time to make ends meet. And I do know how hard it is to come to the UK and get into the clinical route. To me personally, there were a million reasons why I would be hopeless, but I always try to remind myself to stick to the one reason why I want to do this. Yes, it can be extremely difficult, extremely difficult, but it's so worth it. So you have to keep fighting. It's not easy, but you have to keep fighting.
I just wanted to add as well, like what these guys have said, but yeah, I'm not from a middle class background, I'm from a very working class background. I don't know anyone who's a clinical psychologist, so I couldn't be like, oh, Mum, can you ask your friend? Like, you know, I think there was a lot of that going on. It used to really frustrate me when I was at uni and people were getting experience because their parents had friends who were clinical psychologists. That's just not where I'm from. And but I have to say, when I've got into the jobs and like been working in these different environments, people identify with you more because you look like them, you sound like them, they feel less intimidated by you. So I know that right now it feels like a disadvantage and it's frustrating, it really is, but it does become I've found personally it becomes a massive advantage, and it's made my life a bit easier now.
I was just going to add, oh, sorry, Vicky, do you want to go?
Yeah, no, I was just going to concur with everything that everyone said. I think there's something about kind of owning your identity. And I think even when you get on the course, that feeling of like that white privilege might also exacerbate a little bit. But I think before training or before when trying to get on the course, something about connecting with people who you may know, who you might be linked up with on either Instagram or LinkedIn or something like that, that's always helped me and just kind of, I'll say, dampen the hopelessness a little bit. And it's just about kind of reaching out. But I can definitely understand how it's so difficult because it does run rampant, and it's something that you'll continue to think about. It doesn't just stop, you know, when you get on training or I imagine when you qualify and all these things. It's going to be amplified possibly even more. But yeah.
Absolutely. Just a final comment, and we're over time. I just think, firstly, the fact that whoever's asked this question has said it, that screams a lot, because actually when I was in the early stages of career, that you couldn't even talk about the white privilege that was around. It wasn't something you could say, it wasn't really talked about at all. So it kind of was just something you thought about, but then just tried to push away because it was too big an issue to think about. So I remember almost just trying to carry on, keep going and carry on and not think about it too much, even though that is all I saw, and almost felt like I had to mold myself into that. And I think, as everyone said, you know, in terms of holding the hope, you know, own your identity. It is valued. We are living in a different time now. It is being valued. We are seeing that at, I hope, trainees, and from the courses and how courses that are being run nowadays is different to how it was in the past, how it feels as a qualified psychologist working in the field. There is a lot of change happening. So I think hold on to that and hold on to those words, because I think all of us, and you can see the nods, there is change happening. It's slow, but it's happening. And hopefully from seeing our faces, there is that also helps as well. So yeah.
Thanks, Robert. Really, really wise words from everyone. And I was just thinking when everyone was speaking about how it's also important for us to continue having these conversations and keeping these conversations at the forefront of our minds, because the more that we speak about it, the more that we think about it, means that we can start to kind of close that white privilege gap that is out there. I am aware of the time, and I think I wanted to kind of let that question have its time, because I think it is such an important question for us to start thinking about. It is 2 o'clock, so what we will do is we will look at the questions, and we'll get the top 10 questions from part A and part B, so the top 20 questions in total, and we will send it out to all of the facilitators from today and get some answers for you. And I'm going to say, give us some time, give us like a few weeks, and we will then send all of the answers back to you for the top 10 questions on both parts of today. I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's attended, and a great big thank you to all of the facilitators for this part B and part A as well, if they're still on the call. It's always great to hear our experiences and hear from current trainees and current clinical psychologists about what life is like in our roles. So thank you so much. A little bit of housekeeping or extra housekeeping. We will, so we're being done. Feedback forms are going to be posted in the chat. We will also send copies of these with a link to the recording. Again, give us some time. We are managing all of this plus stuff on doctorate, so it might not be until Monday, but we will try and get it done as soon as we can, and send that all out for you. If you do want to join the any of our mailing lists, what I'll do is I'll put my email address in the chat. Oh, Lauren's done it, beats me to it. Lauren just put in the chat my email address, that's to join the IAC mailing list for the Aspiring Psychologist stream. And Sarab, I'm wondering if you or Lucy want to add any information to join any other mailing lists that you both have or run at the same time.
Yeah, I think Lucy's already put it in the chat, so you'll see it's just a link, and you just need to add your email address, and then you're added to the SLaM external Aspiring Psychological Professions mailing list. Thank you.
Perfect. You can see that SLaM are a lot more advanced in these forms than us. We just do the old school Excel sheet. But thank you so much for attending, everyone, today, and we hope that you can take away some of the stuff that we've talked about.
Thanks so much,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody. Thanks, everyone.
Take
Go
care.
and have some lunch.
Bye-bye.